Vinyl, synonymous with good music and bad furniture. If you're of a certain age, you may remember the stereo console as focal point furniture piece in the living room and shelves stacked with record albums. You might even remember the As Seen on TV K-Tel collections. Okay, so not everything about music on vinyl was good. One product, two forms, two very different emotional responses. Happily, we pretty much moved past the bad furniture when we lost avocado and almond as appliance colors. Not many years later, the good vinyl started to disappear too. Digital recording, the advent of the compact disc, the ease of transferring music from a CD to a computer in the very aptly termed RIP. The creation of illegal sharing platforms like Napster, and later the torrent sites. Hell, let's just blame the internet. Marked the onset of what seemed an inexorable downhill slide for analog music. Then along came download outlets like iTunes and streaming services like Spotify, and the CD started to become a relic, consigned to flea markets and neighborhood yard sales. But in the past few years, something good has been happening in the music world. Vinyl records have been coming back. Like the mythical phoenix rising from the ashes, vinyl album sales have been on the rise for the past decade.
80% of the independent stores that participate in Record Store Day do not report to Soundscape. So there's no way they're keeping track of accurate sales figure and what's happening year to year for the last 10 years. And the problem is when those numbers get reported by the mainstream media, it sort of downplays what a revitalization is taking place.
The industry is seeing a renaissance. Recording studios have started mixing for vinyl again. Mastering engineers have started mastering for vinyl again, at least ones who know what that means. New vinyl pressing plants are being built. New vinyl presses are being manufactured for the first time in generations. Record stores are popping up almost daily, and not the big chains. Small independent shops, many catering to specific genre of music and customers' musical tastes.
That's why this exists. This is the whole reason that this exists, is based on what my customers' needs and wants are. I've altered it, I've changed it, I've brought in certain things, I've done this, that, and the other, and it breathes through my customer base. That's it. That's what it is, right? And we've all done the same thing. All the other stores in the city are doing the same thing. They're all living and breathing with their customer base. There's lots of customers. There's lots of stores, and we're all different.
Heavily curated collections with truly knowledgeable nerds sharing their passion for music on vinyl with a receptive and often ravenous audience.
So I got here this morning at 4 a.m.
Is the picture all good? Who's buying vinyl today? Is it just balding baby boomers with a spreading middle making a vainglorious attempt to recapture the glory days of their youth? Is all music on vinyl created equal? Got your red pill? Let's take a jump down the vinyl rabbit hole.
People are interested in vinyl because it's a very personal experience. It's more of a communal experience. People get together and listen to records. And I think that's why a lot of younger music fans are into it.
Whether it was me as a little kid sitting in my room listening to my mother's and father's music or my older brother's music, or even when I brought my first vinyl record, which was Graham Central Station, Larry Graham, it was something that you could hold in your hand. It was visual. And then you put the music on, everything that you was taking in, it becomes a soundtrack to your life.
The big thing, in my opinion, that the record companies did was they should never have discontinued making records. They should have given people a choice. They gave us no choice. And we were just told one day, you're no longer selling records.
Right as it hits its low point in 2006, the next year when the iPhone comes out and everybody has an MP3 player in their pocket and streaming services like Spotify start launching, you know, when you get this all-you-can-listen buffet of music, is you start seeing the uptick of vinyl record sales happening.
It's been the public, the young people are more aware. And I've found the biggest change, and I was saying to him, the phone. The last 3 years, the phone has changed it all.
When I started working in 1953, There was the LP had just broken onto the market in 1948. That was the CBS did it, Columbia, and the 45 was shortly thereafter by RCA Victor.
Well, the first rebirth of vinyl was the trendiness of it, with the White Stripes and people like that, and limited edition small labels. It wasn't massive. Then it started escalating, and I would say the first wave was probably 30 to 40-year-olds. Wouldn't you agree? The kids didn't come until a bit later.
I mean, 20-somethings around 2008, you started. It was hip hop was kind of being slightly displaced by indie rock.
It's cool, straight out. It's a cool medium. The analog medium is cool that it's just this item that plays on a record player, and it's such a natural sort of fitting of the two of them. You're actually watching it work. Unlike streaming or a CD, which you know it's a laser, you know that. You don't actually see that though. There's no connection to it. You can hear the music, but you can't connect to it by watching what happens when you spin it on a record player.
For me, you've got a self-educating consumer, and so it's no longer a world of rare old records and a big fat phone book of a price guide. There's a lot of information out there, so that's one. Also, people carry listening stations in their pocket now, so somebody will hold a record up and punch it in their phone and figure out whether or not they like that music. And if they like it, well, they'll pick the record up.
LPs initially were 10-inch, then they became 12-inch. And they were very plain covers. Well, once they clued in that there's a market in making them look good, by about 1952, 53, the covers were beautiful. And I mean, some of that art is incredible.
The new vinyl revolution, for me, comes about a sense of community. I believe that people were listening to their music on their ones and zeros and their little packages of phones and iPods and things, their devices. There was no real communication between friends about the music they're listening to. Everybody had their earbuds plugged in. Everybody was just on their own little planet. But the vinyl revolution, I think, has come around to making a big community.
I think the revival of vinyl is really, well, particularly right now, related to a lack of ability to actually feel a part of the music that is coming out right now. With, you know, the influence of Spotify and Apple Music and various other streaming services, people are not spending as much time actually like holding a product. And, you know, CDs had their time, but vinyl really gives you more of a chance to interact with something. Like, you physically have to flip it in order to listen to the second side, or, you know, put on side C and D, and you have to pay attention. And I think people are craving that.
I think part of it is actually digital is a little bit responsible for the vinyl revival, in that the more people I think are getting disconnected from that physical product, I think there's a greater desire to go back to that, you know, having an album that you could kind of have as part of your collection, show off, and it kind of like represents like something that you can show physically to like your friends when they come over or whatever, and also so it's not as much of a passive thing. You know, I'll be listening to my iPod or whatever, and I'll just be skipping through songs, where I find when I listen to a record, I'll sit there, I'll listen to the whole thing, and I'll just kind of be more engaged in the moment. I think a lot of people are kind of craving that kind of experience and kind of going back to that.
It's a more comfortable sound, but you're also listening to it in a different area. Like, you're usually listening to it in a music room, living room, someplace like that. Mm-hmm. And you have other people, and you've got artwork to look at, liner notes, and it's sort of a social thing. And I think that's probably one of the reasons it's come back.
So it's the younger generation, 13 to 30-year-olds, who have discovered this new thing called a record. They love the physical aspect of it, dropping the needle on it, the packages, the stuff that comes inside the jacket, and the jacket itself.
The biggest thing for me when it comes to vinyl is that it's more of an experience, and I'm sitting and I'm putting on a record and I'm listening to it in my living room and I'm making something of it, rather than with a song when I'm listening to it on my iPhone, I can kind of just forget about it and go around and do a bunch of other things. So I feel I really get to immerse myself more with the sound of vinyl, and the music fills me more than it does when I'm just listening on my phone.
It fits in with that whole experience culture, which is so popular now, which is, yeah, I'm on the subway or something, I'm in transit and I'm listening to an album, and it's amazingly convenient. But when you're at home, you're gonna wanna take out an album, put it on, listen to it, you get that full experience. And it also, yeah, it does sound better, it truly does. That's not a myth, especially in the percussion. I always am amazed at some of the albums that I've heard hundreds of times, and then I hear it for the first time on vinyl, and you hear a bongo or something, it just sounds like it's in the room with you. It's incredible. So I think, yeah, sound quality, and also just the whole experience of being able to get out, go to a record store, feel part of a community, and it's really sort of more than a listening experience, it's also a lifestyle, and a lot of people embrace that.
We sort of lost something in digital and in, downloading MP3s and in streaming, and people are going like, I want an immersive experience as opposed to just access to a product. I think that's really what iTunes gave us, was the extreme of access to the product, thinking the access to a product was the thing that people wanted itself. But I don't think that is. There's a reason why people fall in love with music, say to the age of like 11, 12, 13, and it becomes, the soundtrack of their experience growing up and being teenagers. That is an immersive experience for you. That's something that people don't want to let go of easily. And I think some of the immersive experience of going to get a record, reading liner notes, bringing it home, being a part of a collection, that's really about how you see yourself. Whereas your collection of MP3s in your computer can never be that for you.
Well, I think what's driving the return to vinyl, what's driven over the past decade is the sort of total physical experience of buying and listening to and collecting records.
Our vinyl collection in our rooms, you have your girlfriend or boyfriend come over. They see that as a signifier for your relationship to yourself. Whereas the access to, the gray list of MP3s on your computer are never going to be that.
When you listen to a record, there has been an awful lot of time and an awful lot of people that have gave their opinion on how these tracks work out. They just don't throw a track out, open up with it and say, okay, that's what's next. There's a plan to how they do it in the record, where the ballad appears, what's the last song on the record. Abbey Road, it ends with The End. It was the last Beatle record, you couldn't have put that at the beginning. There's a lot of effort and thought process put into where these tracks fit on a vinyl LP. So to me, like I said, I think you're getting the purest form of where the artist was when he created that piece of time and froze it in time forever on that record.
A lot of family members too, like the demographic right now where it's coming out is that the older population hasn't disconnected completely from vinyl. So when you let's say your offspring are getting into vinyl, now your parents have something to connect with you on, so there's that physical format versus just tossing on some streaming and playing it through a Bluetooth speaker.
I think it's just so much of our generations wanting to understand and be a part of generations prior, and having that bit of something that is vintage, I guess you could say, classic, like our parents listened to records and now we can listen to records as well. So I think it's just kind of the fact that we're carrying on something that was so big so many years ago and is now still just as important.
Yeah, like we hear about that all the time, where there is that like passed down from the father, son moves on and his dad gives his audio system or his record collection, and a lot of people are getting into it through that way.
I'd say it's definitely a nostalgia thing as well. The bulk of people that I've met, how they get into records is, of course, receiving their parents' old collection when they decide we don't want to bother with the upkeep anymore.
And the more the change occurs, the more the parents, whatever their likings, they reflect it to the child. So instead of hearing the standard classic rock, they may start hearing John Denver or the Carpenters, and that's what they liked. And the kids don't have any prejudice against some of these artists, so they listen to them with fresh ears.
If you look at the demographics of who's buying records today in a store like Kopp's, in a city like Toronto or around the world, it's younger listeners, sometimes as young as their teens even.
It's interesting. It's like a showpiece almost too in your house. It's like a piece of art.
We've found that more so with turntables than almost any product that we sell in this store, is that the choice of the turntable is an aesthetic one. It's something that people aren't hiding away or tucking inside a cabinet. It's out there, it's in the open. And when you have one in your home or your apartment, you almost want people to see it. You want people to notice it.
I unfortunately only still have a Crosley record player, so the sound is weak and it's pretty much just through the in-speaker system. But most of my friends that listen to vinyl as well have like their own amps that they plug the record player into, and that's my next move because I really like the sound of that way more than anything just built in. You definitely want to hook it up to something else to get the full effect of the sound.
I have a, I guess your traditional hi-fi system, a pair of three-way bookshelf speakers that are, I want to say, at least 20 to 30 years old, a turntable that I bought it refurbished from an audio shop that I really trust.
There's a bit of a ritual when it comes to putting a record on, taking it out of the sleeve, then taking it out of the inner sleeve and handling it carefully and, placing it on the platter and then putting the needle down as softly as you possibly can. I mean, this is all the physical part of it, which again, makes it, again, a communal thing. It's a ritual. It's almost a religion to some people. It's wonderful to see people into this. So.
Music needs something more than just sending it over some digital platform. The reason why I'm doing it now is because every time I make a song, I want it to be experienced. So the only way to get to total experience, the total look, smell, and feel, the total blanket of emotion is to do it with vinyl.
Paperback Records has always loved vinyl and has been a big part of it since, I can't even remember, our first release might have been 2005. Why was it? It was because I was a vinyl collector. I've always been, since I was a kid, and I was still collecting vinyl through that period of time when people kind of stopped and people kind of stopped making it, but stores were still carrying it. It was a pretty niche market. And yeah, I was still collecting and I still wanted to make it.
Get the same sound. You can get the same notes through Spotify, through Apple Music, through something else. And sometimes that sound's going to be better, sometimes it's not. But what you don't get is the pleasure of going somewhere, flipping through things, spending the time, talking to the people, getting recommendations, discovering things, and then taking it home and actually owning it, having it, being able to share it, being able to sort of start conversations with it in a way that you can't do with music on your phone or music on your computer, because it's just files, it's just data.
I know Amazon suggests that you can, if you're picking up Pink Floyd, they may suggest a Fleetwood Mac record, but that may not be your bag, So coming to a record store and talking to blokes such as myself and the staff here, I think people get again, that community thing where they can say, yeah, Fleetwood Mac's not really my thing, but. And then you say, well, what about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard? And they're going, who's the what the now? And all of a sudden they've got a brand new favorite band. And so record stores, brick and mortar, coming into them, I think is vital if you're going to be reasonably serious about collecting music and want to be part of the community.
People like to buy locally. People
They
like
like
to
to buy.
walk into a shop. It's a whole different experience. And vinyl lends itself to the tangible.
And we have to be
and a brick and
user-friendly.
mortar lends itself into the
You've got to
tangible
be
because it is.
You've got to be user friendly.
If you're going to shop online for records like that, then you're most likely someone who streams records as well and doesn't enjoy the experience of going out to a record store and looking for records. You're a different mindset of shopper, and that's kind of not what I'm doing here, or I don't think any record store is doing. They're catering to people who actually like to leave the house, look through a section, maybe find something that they weren't interested in the first place, or something they were like, oh, I didn't even know this existed, or what is this all about? The people online who are shopping on Amazon or whatever, wherever you're buying your music from, and clicking, and yeah, they're just online shoppers, and they're online listeners, and they're part of a community that is I'm not servicing. Yeah.
Women are becoming more a vinyl fan or part of vinyl culture now because that's the only way you can really participate in fan culture. There used to be more like you could subscribe to Rolling Stone or to Spin or to whatever magazine and find out about your favorite band, and now you're subscribing to their social media feeds. And I think in order to feel that tangible connection, it is a process of buying vinyl or t-shirts or what have you, but I think that's where women are becoming more a part of it, because women are still music fans, but now it's just a different way of showing it.
I don't necessarily think that it's women weren't interested in buying vinyl before. I think that it's just our music industry is becoming less and less of a boys' club and less exclusive to men, and we see more women doing amazing things in all aspects of the industry every day. So why wouldn't they be buying music? Why wouldn't they be buying records?
It was very much a transition from, I went to university, left my CD collection behind, had my iTunes collection for a bit, and then wanted that feeling again of buying music that I had with me. And I wanted to do the pour over the liner notes thing and really have a library of what my collection was that I could see and interact with. And that's really what started. And it also coincided with me starting working at paper bags, so I knew a lot more about the process of making vinyl and what it was worth, and it sent me down the rabbit hole.
And you own it. You're not leasing it, you own it. Like with Spotify and Apple Music, you never own anything. You just keep paying.
You can get a really great system for under $1,000 now, and it's more than adequate. Like, it'll play your records, and you'll be very happy with the warmth and the sound that comes from this stuff.
People who are buying our speakers were also vinyl listeners. They had that as part of their system, and I think we had a pretty good reputation with our speaker products. There was an opportunity for us to create a really awesome turntable that would cater to that same customer. So, when we introduced that turntable, it sort of completed our lineup at the time, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, look, when we first started looking into and doing the research sort of in the marketplace, we saw a lot of like cheap suitcase style turntables, which our target demographic would not touch that with a 40-foot pole. But then you had like $500 to $700 to $1,000 turntables, and it just really wasn't accessible for the everyday person with a small amount of disposable income. So at that point, enter a $250 turntable that pairs with some fairly decent quality. We just hit a bit of a stride with our first model, the RT81.
It's an expensive process getting all the appropriate gear to start this collection, but I mean, the Crosleys serve their purpose, and those like one-stop shops serve their purpose, but I really think if you're going to bother to collect vinyl, you might as well get something that's going to showcase it to the best of its ability, or at least close to that. So I have an Audio Technica, and I definitely am not like a gear person by any means, but when I was buying my record player, I did the research. I looked for the right receiver, looked for the right speakers that are all still manageable within my apartment, and I wanted to really commit to it. And so I think there is something to be said about finding what makes sense for you, because some people are just happy to have the Crosley, and that's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think if you're going to go to the point of having all this vinyl, you might as well hear it properly.
Look for a plus $200 turntable. Read the reviews online about them and get the one that makes you feel comfortable. Pair that with a quality external phono preamp and a nice set of speakers, whether you want to go active speakers or passive speakers with an amplifier that you already have. Vintage equipment's great, like don't discount that either. And just have fun. I mean, the main thing about it is to have fun with records and with the medium. So, stumble, make mistakes, and then figure out what you like.
And start by talking about the demographics of who's buying turntables. Yeah, it's mostly men, but the age range is perhaps larger than most products that we sell here at the store. We see mothers and fathers buying turntables for their sons. We see teenagers. We see a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, both men and women, buying their first turntable or upgrading their existing turntable.
A lot of materials that are used today in the manufacturing of turntables didn't exist or were not common at all back in those days. Nowadays you see turntables that employ carbon fiber as a material used in tone arm tubes.
Well, in general, I think, at least the turntables we sell, the quality of the components and the quality of the materials is better. And that will lead to better sound, that will lead to better reliability. Simple things, such as a quieter motor.
Motors nowadays, good quality motors, are much quieter, again, because the components are manufactured to more precise standards than they were able to do that 30, 40, 50 years ago.
You sort of have to deal with them and be as sympathetic as you can. But after they get to hear maybe our machine or a couple other machines, they'll say, oh, maybe I need something a little better. And hopefully that will happen. Because I can't imagine you spending $40, $30 on a record and putting it on a $129 record player. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Spending $20, $25, $30 on high quality vinyl records nowadays, and you're playing them on a turntable that is basically destroying these records after 1 or 2 or 5 plays because of a very poor quality cartridge and a very poor quality tone arm.
It's of my mind that if you're going to buy records and play records, you have to spend money to get a decent record player. We're talking like entry level of the decent record players, like $300-400 for this TIAC down here, or the Projects, or there's a few other brands, and they all make like an entry level $300-400 record player. The Crossleys, not only, I mean, there's evidence that they ruin records, but also like just the components are so cheap that you're not getting any of the benefits of audio quality whatsoever.
Built-in speakers. That is a really bad idea. A cartridge in a turntable picks up everything that every vibration, every resonance that gets thrown at it. So if the speakers are built into the turntable, first of all, they're very, very close to each other. So you're not going to get a normal stereo reproduction because it's basically mono that you're listening to. If you're standing 3 feet away or 4 feet away from that turntable, it's mono. The speakers are so close together because of the size of the turntable. It's a physical limitation. But those speakers, when they are playing, also generate a vibration. They vibrate when they play. And that vibration is a result of a signal that was picked up by the cartridge milliseconds before that. So it's always delayed, time delayed, versus the signal that the cartridge is picking up at that very moment. So you're feeding back a heavy time-delayed signal back into the cartridge, which it picks up again and becomes a loop. So that loop becomes distortion.
I will actually have to invest in it and learn and know what I'm doing so that I can upgrade appropriately and to get the sound that I want the most.
As people got more into the hobby, they started learning more about certain things that affect performance and what they wanted to see in the turntable. So we wanted to incorporate that in our new models. So, we wanted to keep going up and up just as, some of our customers did.
I'm starting to look more into the doing my homework side of things in order to upgrade those components.
So it's definitely like a learning experience in itself, you can't just buy a record player willy-nilly. Crosley might have thought that worked, but it really doesn't.
Since we started putting records out, since we started pressing vinyl, for the most part, I would say, we have mastered for vinyl.
All the decisions all the engineers are making along the way are for a digital world. Nobody, or rarely ever, are they thinking about vinyl or analog.
You're absolutely right that it is led that way. Typically what happens is
when the master is finally delivered, it's readied for digital assets first, and that could also be CD, by the way.
The way audio has really changed in the past 30 years on the production and mixing side is primarily in the beginning, audio was about capturing a live performance.
You know, all audio these days is digital one way or another. I mean, we rarely get an analog. When we do, it's great.
We'll actually go back to Sterling, have them master for vinyl. We'll cut that lacquer there at Sterling. We'll send that lacquer to get plated at the plant where we're going to press it. And you're going to get a recording that's obviously based on that digital file that is delivered, but you're also looking at the high-res version of it to be cut for vinyl and actually treated that way.
Then as things sort of went on, you got into, you know, tape tracking and overdubbing, which was originally actually introduced by Les Paul.
Really what it's about now is, what's the right thing for the project?
What that introduced, though, was a lot of issues with noise floor. Original analog tape was very noisy, tube gear can be very noisy, and a lot of the limitations of early recording was that. Go ahead 30 years into digital, you know, around the early 80s, and what you have is it really reduced noise floor problems.
We run 24 hours a day now. 8-10 years ago, we were running one shift, and we were lucky to keep that one shift going.
The challenges we've had have been having equipment that's decades and decades and decades old. We've had to recreate some of the equipment, rebuild some of the equipment, and bring new technology in at the same time.
We started to get inquiries many years ago for vinyl records. And then we started to hear the follow-up tales of how difficult it was for these artists, record labels, and clients to get their records made in a timely fashion. Being in the front lines and having that access to the customer base, the musicians, the independent independent musicians, the record labels, the brokers, the promoters, being in that business already gave us a clear indication that there was an increase in business in the vinyl side of things.
Our early customer base has tended to be newcomers into the market, so either independent record labels, people who've been brokering vinyl, looking to get into production, CD manufacturing plants that are looking to add vinyl back into their mix.
Vinyl is a more inclusive experience, and the reason people say things like it's more warm and it's more natural is because it has, fidelity changes, volume changes just like real life does. There's nowhere else in real life where you have this sort of saturated, simple, the change of 2 or 3 decibels only. You don't have those kinds of like straight ahead volume inferences in nature. So vinyl does sound more natural, that's the point.
With some of the older stuff and even the newer stuff, if it's not really been created to sound good in that analog process, that would be something where we would send, first off, you would be in the mastering phase on who you're dealing with. You'd have to get it remastered so that it sounded right and all, the frequencies were there. You can do what you want when you send it to our guys to cut the test pressings, but you'd really have to go back and do the proper remastering on the record. And that's where a lot of the aspects of people that are recording on their Apple computers or their systems at home, that is one of the benefits of having somebody in a studio that knows how to work these frequencies out, knows what they're doing. And a lot of these guys that run these studios and run the mastering labs now are very well equipped and very well knowledgeable at what they're doing. You would need to go that process if you truly want something that sounds good. I mean, nobody wants to put something out that sounds like shit.
Music that was recorded originally for digital will, just because of the medium of vinyl, will put in it some warmth and some volume fidelity just by pure nature of the medium of the vinyl.
Everything about vinyl forces you to slow down. Like when we master it, we have to do it with more care. We can't let things slip by. Even from Kevin's perspective, when he listens to something, he has to say, no, this won't work. You have to go back and fix it. So it's a really slow process. And in this, day and age, of course, again, this is really cliche, but this day and age where everything's so fast, we want it now. Like you push one button to Amazon and then a robot or drone comes and delivers it to you in an hour. Vinyl doesn't work that way.
There's more of an awareness now, at least than than kind of a few years ago would have been the peak of people expecting expecting to be able to put whatever they want onto the disc without any without compromise.
Digital suddenly opened it up to no noise floor. The fidelity across the board is better. There's more lows, there's more highs. It's not so mid-rangey. But what that has done in a lot of ways now in terms of this is sort of reduced character.
Nobody or rarely ever are they thinking about vinyl or analog. We used to have this thing called the loudness wars in the mastering world where masters would get louder and louder and louder.
The vast majority, and just because of the ease of use of, and it's just the way it's done, is a lot of the mastering is done digitally. And what we say to that is, that's fine as long as it's a very high quality digital source. I mean, we're talking high quality as in much higher than a CD quality. And people will use that as a standard and say, okay, CD quality is, is 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz. Well, we'll say, you know what, the minimum that you should be providing to us for a vinyl record is 24-bit as opposed to 16-bit and 96 kilohertz instead of the 44.1 kilohertz. By having that extra high resolution starting point, we can get that, the optimal sound that we're looking for.
DMM has actually been around. It's not a new process. DMM was such a big thing in the 80s when it first came out. Everybody wanted their album done DMM. I don't really know if you put one in front of me and played the other one and didn't tell me what it was, whether I would really hear a difference.
It has its advantages. It has some very distinct disadvantages.
One of the most traditional ways of making a record is lacquer to stamper to press. And that's the process that we decided to stick with. We don't want to change too much the actual feel and sound of the record.
It's very limited in its scope of what it can be used for. It works very good for certain genres of music. Definitely, from most I understand, it loses the warmth, a lot of what they have from vinyl.
Really the past 15 years in audio, we've really seen, sort of go our move to full digital and then sort of back. So yeah, for a while there, I mean, if you've ever heard of something called the loudness wars. So the loudness wars were in the 90s. There was this move toward, for major record labels to go, when I want my song, when my artist is being played on the radio, I want my song to really jump out and really, be louder than the song before. So that what that started in mastering was when you would sort of bring up volumes and stuff like that. And I got to the point where, music started sounding really, really compressed and really small because there is only so much volume you can have.
On the digital side, with plugins, effects plugins, DAWs that have built-in effects, and just the general digital workflow.
So if it's all loud, what we have is the perception that it's actually softer.
In the analog world, in the old studio world, you had whatever equipment was in the studio and that was it. You could maybe rent some equipment, but you had a limited amount. Now, if you have a plugin suite, even the free plugins, you can have hundreds and hundreds of plugins, and it's an unlimited amount of plugins.
Analog is actually natural harmonics, pulse, going through transistors, turning into audio. Digital is emulating that at best. It's a painting of a real person.
But when you're using plugins, you're literally just distorting this clean signal path. And so with people having hundreds of plugins to use, they just overuse them. And a lot of that stuff doesn't work very well with vinyl. It's or in analog in general.
Like Noah said, once the distortion's in there, it's in there for good, and you can never take it out. You can just mitigate it in certain ways.
More than that, in digital compression, if you get super, super loud, it actually reduces the stereo field. Because if the left speaker and the right speaker are doing exactly the same thing because they're both maxed out in volume, it actually sounds mono. So it starts reducing actually the stereo width of the recording also.
The nature of the average pressing job today is a lot different from what it was back in 1979. Back then, it wasn't uncommon for record runs to be 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 record runs. These days, the average job is about 300 records, so it means a lot more changeovers between jobs. So that was a big focus for us, to make it easier to do, a stamper change, for example, is about a half an hour process on one of those old presses, and that was way too long for us. So we have a custom tool. It's just a twist lock system, locks in place, can't fall off, and it takes about 3 minutes to change the stampers.
One of the things that our team has recently developed is an improved label that goes on the records. Part of the process actually involves heating up the label or baking it to get moisture out so it doesn't stick to the plates in the pressing process. And this is something that's been done 40, 50 plus years in the manufacturing of vinyl, is baking the labels, having paper labels that are dry enough so they don't stick. We've actually developed a new improved process for manufacturing vinyl labels for the press.
We are seeing labels thinking about taking their production and actually bringing it in-house. We have a press at Third Man Records in Detroit. They had recently set up with manual presses, and as they progressed their business, found that bringing in an automated machine is really what they need to keep up with those larger scale orders, the 5,000 and up runs, which they receive a lot of. We've installed that now for a few months. It's running beautifully, and they're happy with it, which makes us happy.
I think some of the bottlenecks we still see is not so much in the plating and the mastering of the records, although they are swamped. Anybody that does it is running 24/7. That seems to be meeting the criteria, the 2 weeks that we need. I think obviously the production is fine on our end. We're getting that. I think a lot of plants are still having that problem where production is taking 8 to 10 weeks instead of the 6. For our end, where we want to see improvement is on the production and packaging. So when the stuff gets ready to get it packaged, get it out the door, because it's still a manual process. I mean, GZ has also automated that process where they have machines that do it. For us and probably most plants in the world, it's still a manual process where a person has to do it all, then into the shrink wrap machine.
It's disheartening when you got to tell them that, look, this song won't go on to record, vinyl, without some major alterations. And then you get the same question back every time, like, why? Just fix it then. I'm like, well, but it's going to sound very different. And they're like, I don't understand. They don't know.
When you make a digital recording, you can ask the speaker to go from here to here in no time at all and create this really sharp transient energy at almost any frequency.
And then in terms of speakers, with the advent of laptops and listening on cell phones now, those are mono things. Like if your laptop speakers are closer together than your ears are, you're dealing with something that is fundamentally more mono than it is stereo. And then obviously cell phones full out are just mono.
When you're playing it back from a record, the needle has to be able to track what the same path that the digital file is trying to give it. So there's a fundamental limit to how fast you can get the needle from the push to the pull side from the push impulse to the pull impulse.
Vinyl is really a medium that needs full range speakers because first of all, the fidelity is wider, which means it has more lows and it has more highs. But also the volume increase and decrease is really extreme. And what you need is a better set of speakers to be able to handle that. So
we are very excited about the developments in vinyl, and not just today, but in the near future. I think that there is, because of this resurgence, and because we're not in the 1960s or 70s anymore, there's technologies available today that no one ever thought to apply back in those days when vinyl first started out. I mean, there are, for example, camera inspection systems, high speed, that can catch flaws that the human eye can't. I mean, all the quality is still being done manually in the industry. That's somebody actually picking up a record and checking it. And we're just very excited about what the future holds.
I try to keep my collection pretty small so that, I don't know, I'm not leaving so much of a footprint when these old vinyls aren't any good anymore, right? So I think it's just something to be conscious of. I don't necessarily think it would stop me from buying a record, but definitely in the back of my mind.
It's something that I'm starting to consider more and more because it feels like a selfish thing to purchase, and obviously it is, but it's so different from what everyone else is doing right now with Spotify and Apple Music and the like that, you're really just buying it for yourself to have this thing. And is that necessary? Probably not. So hopefully down the line, there will be something that replaces what we're doing now and makes it more environmentally friendly. I don't know a lot about whether that is in the works, but it just seems like something that's going to be necessary to keep that industry alive.
Vinyl and records are kind of a different animal when it comes to other tech products because they have a longer lifespan. You have your smartphone, which I find kind of 3 years, and then it's kind of an obsolete product. Where this stuff, as you get into it, as you grow your system, a lot of times you get a good audio system and you're kind of set for 30 years. Plus, it could be your whole life and you're kind of good to go. You don't need anything else. Whereas other things, you constantly upgrade them. But likewise, like even with your system, as you upgrade, a lot of that goes into a resale market. And that goes to be enjoyed by someone else, or you pass it down to your kid. Same with the actual physical records. There's so much of a resale market, whether it's Discogs or whatever. It's not necessarily a brand new product that you're buying every time. You are kind of recycling a product in a way by buying those used records. They've had a life for 30 years of enjoyment when it comes to music.
First, we'd have to address the fact that that there is an environmental issue here to begin with. If we have that in the background, when somebody is in the process of purchasing or consuming vinyl, it is unlikely that they're at the same time making an environmental decision in their minds. So it's not like they're sitting and analyzing, well, does the fact that I'm purchasing this record actually impact the environment in any given way? Usually they're going to be focusing on their enjoyment aspect of the purchasing process and of the consuming process. So in my opinion, it is unlikely that somebody is taking the environmental impact into consideration during this particular decision-making process. Whether it's more environmentally friendly or less environmentally friendly than digital, it's not that's a question for the scientists. But there is obviously the possibility, depending on all the different inputs that we put into our life cycle assessment. That doesn't necessarily say that when we pit that against other aspects of the enjoyment, say, of consuming vinyl, that the environment would win out at the end of the day. I think what we would expand it to do, and which we don't do right now, is galvanics, which would be the dipping in the bath, the nickel to create the stamps. That would probably be within the next, I'd say, 2 years, something that we'll look at. Obviously, it's an environmental concern.
Sustainability-wise, I do think we need to improve manufacturing to make sure that vinyl stays, because there is a quality issue right now. We like to think our machines are playing a huge part in making quality better, because if people are going to go spend $30 on a record in comparison to a free stream, it has to be pristine copy, very high quality product. So the manufacturing sort of has to adapt into a sense. We got to make sure that we have machines that are going to put out quality records, and that will in a sense help it become more sustainable.
When we're talking about vinyl specifically, one of the important things to do if we're trying to make our decision based on environmental knowledge is to understand that it's a complex process that has many different components. And one environmental tool that can be used in the decision-making process is life cycle assessment. But when we're looking at items like a record, it's very difficult even to give a number of what, say, the carbon impact of vinyl would be.
It's very important to us to be as environmentally responsible as possible in the manufacturing process. And we've accomplished this in many different ways, right from actually in all of our different product processes. For example, in our printing processes, we've gone with waterless presses where the startup time or the run-up is 10 sheets versus 300 sheets on a typical water-based press or aqueous press. So our decision making all along has always been to try and reduce our footprint on the environmental aspect. So when we print the labels that go on the records, or we print the inserts that go inside, we do that with as little footprint as possible, and we recycle all of our extra waste. And that also applies to the vinyl manufacturing as well. All of our waste records, or the extras, or the damaged records, or anything with that was rejected in the quality process, we punch out the labels and regrind all the material to be reused in the process.
We try to keep our stuff when we make it at a great level of quality. So I think if you're doing that as a manufacturer, that, like Mark said, that piece is going to last you for 30 years. Versus, let's say, other brands that are just trying to put something out, it might last 2 years, right? That's where we maybe wouldn't want to play.
I've never really thought about the environmental impact of that particular hobby before. It's something that I am mindful and conscious of in a lot of other aspects of my life. But as far as that goes, that's where I'm kind of interested to see technology surrounding vinyl and the manufacturing process change, as to whether we can change the size of the footprint that this is leaving on our Earth.
Working with the resin manufacturers, the plating equipment companies, and the actual plating houses, and even the companies that make the labels, to get our feedback to them and push them on consistency and quality, because ultimately a lot of steps have to happen with that consistency and quality to ensure that you get a good record at the end of that process. I think the move away from vinyl was kind of a natural, logical progression, because people wanted more portable music, and sort of every step of the way towards that, we lost a little bit in terms of the quality of the audio and just the quality of the package and the format, and the tangibility. And that's sort of gone full circle to the point where now that we've gone through the cassette tape and the CD and the digital file to streaming, where basically anybody can listen to any song anywhere in the world anytime they want. The reasons why people are coming back to vinyl as their choice of a physical media option is to kind of get away from that a little bit, from this vast collection of digital files that you can't see and you don't even realize what you have anymore, to something that's more of an actual deliberate experience, where you have to take the record out, put it on the table, turn it over after 20 minutes, and it's more of a time commitment and a deliberate thing. And I just can't imagine another format coming along that would replace vinyl for those reasons, right? Who's going to come up with something that's, this is the new thing that gives you more of that? It just doesn't. It doesn't seem like that's out there as a possibility.
A lot of bands will actually push their album sales through the streaming platforms. So for that matter, yeah, they do connect with each other. CDs just kind of dropped out, so there's not a lot of nostalgia with that, whereas vinyl has that nostalgia factor. And there's a little bit more componentry involved with the analog format.
I think a lot of people would argue the superior sound quality of vinyl as well, and it has that staying power, I think. Maybe it won't be to the same level that it did kind of at its absolute height, but it seems like, I think it will sustain for a number of years, and those people that have invested in audio systems and those albums now, I think they're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, staunch supporters.
The vinyl experience is about the experience itself. That's not necessarily about listening to the music even. It's about the holding the thing, experiencing the thing, the fact that somebody created a piece of art and then handed it to you. That's a really big deal, and that's something we're sort of fighting for, which is interesting. And now labels are starting to really take notice.
The thing about records, which is so different than digital, it's not just about the audio quality. It's about the process. It's about the process of pulling the record out, pulling it out of its sleeve, putting it on. You got 20 minutes to, like, if you're I always say, if you're sitting in the couch making out, you got 20 minutes and you got to take a break. You know, it's like, it's that physical process. It's that, and we relate so much better to the sound of vinyl. It's not a proven fact, but they did some studies, I guess in Japan or something, where they played all different formats and measured people's brain waves, and they saw that analog and records put people instantly into a relaxed state. But what they also found is that if they played a blank record, so a record cut with no audio whatsoever, people still went into that relaxed state. So it's the mere sound of the noise, of the grooves, of everything else, of the speakers just slightly vibrating, that put people into this relaxed state. Funny enough.
You can get that in a plug-in, can't you?
Yeah, probably.
If the goal is to make something that is energetic and vibrant and inspiring, that's where you start going after that last 5-10%. And I think the resurgence in vinyl is the beginning of that. There's something about our want to have access to a more exciting experience, which is the reason why it's coming back and why people want it.
You know, everything is available now on Spotify, on, you know, Apple Music, whatever, everything's all there. So why don't you look at that? Like, all music is available all the time now, but why are people still coming in and still wanting to buy a physical item when, if they want to sign up for the, you know, the free version of any of these places, they can listen to it for nothing. It's not exciting.
People tire of listening to the stuff and go back to their phones. They already have their phones.
There's something about that experience that we know we lost online.
I do think vinyl is sustainable. Right now, I'm in firm belief that streaming is going to be the bull's share of the market always, but there's always going to be that other side of the market, which is the physical market, and I think vinyl has sort of become the heavyweight option there. It's not going to leave. There will be a time, maybe in 5 years, when we stop seeing year-over-year growth, but by then the exponential growth will be huge. I think it will normalize, and when people want a physical copy, I imagine vinyl being what they go to. The trend with the youth being the majority of the buyers is a huge indicator. Turntable sales have been higher than they've ever been. I think there was a number that Rega was putting out, something like selling 35,000 turntables a month, and that's a very high-end turntable. That's a turntable people are gonna be buying records to listen on.
So I think there's something that we lost that's so integrally human about our music collections that the MP3 didn't give us.
I don't see it slowing down. I think because of the fact that so many of the millennials are into it. I mean, I'd read a stat a year ago that, you know, 18 to 35 bought 53% of all the vinyl that was being manufactured. I know last year in our wholesale division, hardware upgrades are one of the biggest things that sold. So when people upgrade their hardware and get better turntables, they're not going to leave the format anytime soon. So I don't really see it slowing down over the next 3 to 5 years.
There's one study that was done in the UK about how buying music supports our relationship to artists. And it's interesting. Actually, Billy Corgan talks about it. There's an interview with him on Billy Corgan, the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins, talking to Joe Rogan about it. And he talks about the fact that when we get music for free, we have no vested interest to have a relationship with the artist or that music. When we buy a product, we are emotionally invested in reaffirming the decision of buying that product.
Now that you can make that direct comparison between the streamed audio and the vinyl, the difference is very, very clear, and they do both have a place. But if you're going to have both, it doesn't make sense to have, you know, streaming and then something in between, like to go back to CDs. If you're going to go back, you might as well go all the way back to get all of the all of the benefits and all of the reasons why people liked vinyl, and they liked that whole experience, and just the magnitude of what you actually have with a record.
Vinyl is sustainable to a point this time around, because it's not like it's going to be replaced by the new pretty technology this time around. We've already done that. It's a throwback to something else. It's solving a different problem. And On the other side, though, I think people tend to go through phases of minimalism, and this is not an activity you can really participate in when you're a minimalist. You have to have the stuff. And so I do think there is a part of it that could go away because of that and general trends towards minimalism, and also just the price points. I think it's unfortunate that prices are going up on vinyl right now, but also working on the label side, it's necessary because you're seeing less income come in through other sources for artists. So you've got to get as much as you can from something tangible that's selling.
There's something viscerally human about collecting vinyl.
I don't see any reason why it isn't sustainable. The main indicator economically that I see from the industry, right, if we're just talking about the business, is, you know, a constraint of supply and still outstripping demand. So there are new vinyl record pressing plants opening up all around the world because people cannot press enough records fast enough.
So there's something that we want about the experience of going to get music that we lost somewhere, and now we're starting to demand that back.
I view it sort of as, if you're a music listener and you do most of your listening on Spotify, and you're really into a band and you're really listening to the album, that's when you're going to go out to the record store. Or even nowadays, you can just order vinyl right on Spotify. They usually have the records for sale, not CDs, but just the vinyl. If you really support that band, you're going to go out and get the physical product, or maybe buy it at the show as a cool showpiece, and also as a sort of a high-end listening experience.
It is that combination of the digital and vinyl. Sometimes people have discovery of certain artists through, you know, they'll be streaming something on Spotify or whatever. They discover a band they really like, and then all of a sudden they're searching for their record. I did that myself. There was one song that I heard. It was awesome. I listened to the rest of the album, and then next day I had their album in my house. So I think there is that possibility of them coexisting together nicely.
Yeah, a lot of bands are actually pressing vinyl too. So if you're someone that really enjoys music and goes out to shows and you've grabbed that band's album, when you get that home, you've already got that connection. So you actually, you know, you want to play that album and maybe not stream it.
I do see it being kind of a streaming thing where streaming and vinyl coexist together. People hear the music on streaming, decide it's something they really want to invest in, and they buy the vinyl LP. So long term, long after I'm done my work time, I see that being the two formats that are the main formats for music.
Will it ever go back to the way it was in 1975? No, of course not.
I don't think we'd ever get to this space where we would actually ship 500,000 units of an LP. I don't think that day will ever come back.
Good.
Actually, that day will never come back. However, will a record sell that many copies over time from release to whenever you do that RIAA measurement? Yeah, I could absolutely see that.
But we obviously open our arms greatly to the independent labels, even the 100-unit runs. We want to service the music guys because they're really the ones that kept vinyl alive when the major labels said, we're done with this format, everybody buy a CD.
Myself, who've been doing it for this is going on my 47th year, I feel like I was born, died, and I've been reborn.
The main idea is going forward, we're going to try and keep ourselves rooted in vinyl, not only for manufacturing pressing plants that are making vinyl, but also just for like the end user, bringing products that are going to make the end quality of better. For the people going in the stores and buying a record, they can guarantee that it's going to be a high quality product, and also just sort of pushing the industry. As a member of the vinyl industry, as a company, it's sort of our job to make sure that it's healthy. So we want to keep on pushing projects that are gonna make everyone's lives easier and the product better.
We're just very excited about what the future holds. I think we're going to see a lot of new developments in the near future. We're going to see the process improved. We're going to see, you know, a lot more accuracy, more, you know, catching more things that couldn't be caught before by the human eye. And I think that's very important. It's not enough just to say we're making vinyl. We have to make vinyl better and constantly improve the process in order to keep the customers engaged. And we have to create exciting new products as well. We're always playing around with colors and effects on the records as well. These are things that people, you know, like to have. They're unique, they're interesting, they're fun, and it's the wow factor. And we want to continue wowing the customer.
The vinyl LP, when people put records together, and I'm going more so the old school, although it's happened in newer stuff like the Foo Fighters, it's a complete record. Sgt. Pepper's, side 1, side 2 were meant to be that way. You look at Dark Side of the Moon, it was meant to be that way. It's a complete journey through that artist in time. And the fact that you can read the liner notes and actually follow the lyrics, especially at my age when I can't even see what the CD says anymore, it brings back my youth. And it's an industry that I've been in for over 40 years and seen it recycled back. And I think that when you sit down and you just listen to a record, there's a warmth about it that you don't get in other formats. And if you really just listen, I think it takes you to a place that took me to all kinds of happy spots when I was a kid growing up, sitting in Hamilton in the East End and listening to a Slade record or listening to Uriah Heep, and they take you away and tell those stories. I think it's just, most people were making records. They were not making CDs. We're doing a new album. That's the way it was always billed growing up. So I think there's a whole complete cycle to making an album rather than just releasing a bunch of singles. And if you really want to experience the artist, there's no better format than vinyl. Get up, turn it over, listen to side 2, follow the artist through that journey. That's why they all have different titles. That's why they're all different sections in time. Listen to it and experience it. And if it's somebody that you really enjoy, I think you'll understand their music a lot more.
And the other thing that I'm finding is, as it's growing in popularity, there is more material available. So there's stuff, they are repressing old albums that haven't really been around for a while, or they're kind of taking stuff out of the vault that's never been heard, and because there is that appetite for the vinyl, they're starting to release that. So they'll release that on vinyl and then on digital as well. So we're getting kind of spoiled with all kinds of new material available.
Life has an impact on the environment, and of course, there are many ways in which we could minimize our impact on the environment. And ultimately, we have to decide what kind of life we want to live. And a life without music is, somewhat less rich than life with music.
Everyone who's buying records today is doing it out of a choice.
Vinyl is important to me because I gotta make sure people never forget the vinyl experience is a life experience.
Vinyl is back in a major way, and it's no longer a niche thing. It's not only a big cultural phenomenon, but it's also a big business.
I think it has staying power. I think it's been around forever. So I mean, that in itself is enough of reason for it to keep going. And I think it's the experience that vinyl creates, and it's watch it play and get up and put the needle back on. And it's so much of that physical experience that I think will stay more than anything, because it's that power of music that will keep bringing people together and getting them to sit in rooms and hang out and listen to good music.
So I think the market will continue growing simply because if a 15-year-old girl buys a record, it could be a new record by Beyonce. If she buys it, that's the first form of hardware she's ever owned. So when she's 25 and she's got disposable income, or 35 when she's got more disposable income, she's going to be into records.
It seems to me that at least every year since I've started writing about the vinyl revival, that question gets asked by multiple people at least once a year. And here we are now still talking about it. So I don't think it will. Lots of changes to be made as far as pricing goes on records and components alike. And I think if those keep climbing higher at the behest of record labels, then maybe we'll see a noticeable drop-off in popularity. It's a wonderful hobby if you can afford it. And don't be ashamed of not having the greatest records or the greatest gear when you start.
There are still tons of great local record shops in every city, and tons of people that you can support, and just go out there and look around, and you'll be sure to find people that can help you figure it out, and you can find your own niche.
I think we've passed the doubters who said it was a fad.
Things is about to change.
Vinyl has arrived.
there is kind of always an upgrade path. So you could get into a fairly simple system. You could get just a simple turntable, a set of powered bookshelf speakers. That's everything you need to enjoy records kind of right out of the box. Yeah. And then kind of as you grow in the hobby, you can upgrade. You could get better speakers, better, stylus, all that stuff. There's so many options, but you don't have to go crazy right off the beginning. You could just kind of test the waters and see how you like that experience.
You've heard a lot over the course of this film about vinyl, the production of vinyl, why artists are issuing records on vinyl. You've heard about turntables. You've heard from labels about why they want to put their artist music on vinyl. I want to talk a little bit about how you can get better sound without spending a lot of money. We all want good sound. That's why we listen to music. That's why we listen to music on vinyl. We like the sound. Sound quality of vinyl is better than anything digital you're going to come across. But there are some pitfalls. And there are some ways to avoid some of those pitfalls. A lot of people are getting into vinyl with one of these. And this is one of the budget turntables that's available. It's got built-in speakers underneath that fire down. It's got all the little tricks with the USB and the Bluetooth and whatnot. And these are getting a lot of people into vinyl, but they also may be getting a lot of people out of vinyl because the sound isn't that good and people may be thinking, why did I bother? Why did I do this if this is what it sounds like? First of all, these things come with a very cheap cartridge that is not replaceable. It is used by many of these manufacturers because it is cheap, and that's the only reason it's used. They come often with a sapphire stylus that is a spherical shape, and that is not going to give you the best sound. The sapphire is going to wear down more quickly than a diamond. What you can do is you can upgrade the stylus. Even though you can't upgrade the cartridge, you can upgrade the stylus. And what you want to do is you want to go to a website called LP Gear, and you want to look for a Seraprime stylus. And it's a diamond stylus, and it will, as soon as you put that on, it will immediately give you an improvement in sound. Some of these styluses even have a plastic cantilever, which is going to do nothing for you in terms of how well it picks up sound. These come with a very heavy tracking force. They put a lot of stress on the record, and they will ruin your records over time. They are a ceramic cartridge, and ceramic cartridges, because of the way they work, they're not as sensitive as the magnetic cartridges that are more common and that are better quality, and they need that higher tracking force to pick up the vibrations from the groove in the record. You can, if you want to, if it has a cantilever like this one does, it has a bit of a cantilever back here, not a lot. You can try putting some lead tape on the back of here to adjust the weight balance, but keep in mind that you're going to end up making the tracking lighter in the groove, which isn't going to pick up the vibrations as well, because, as I say, these cartridges are not as sensitive. Now, if you're going to use one of these with the built-in speakers for a while until you can upgrade to a better one, another thing you can do to help improve your sound quality is to get a set of additional speakers. These are small bookshelf speakers. They're from a company called Kanto. They are powered speakers, which means they have a built-in amplifier. But these also have a built-in preamp. And what that means is you don't need an external preamp or an external amplifier if you upgrade to a better turntable. You can just plug your new table right into these and get really good sound out of the box. If you want better bottom end out of your music, then you can add a subwoofer. This is the Kanto subwoofer that it's part of the same line as the speakers, and this will give you much better bottom end out of your music. and it will make your music sound that much better, that much fuller. You'll fill the room, and these in combination give really good sound. These are what I use, and I really like them. Now, when you're ready to upgrade your table, you're going to go with something like this probably. This is the sort of the bottom end of the line of one of the more well-known turntable manufacturers. It has a much more solid tone arm. The tone arm has an adjustable counterweight on the back that will allow you to change the tracking weight on the record if you change the cartridge. You can upgrade the cartridge on these. They come with a standard half-inch mount for the head shell, and this will give you vastly better sound than the budget table that you may be starting out with. This doesn't have all of the bells and whistles that some of the really expensive tables do, but if you're just going from one of these to this, the improvement will be exponential. You'll know why you got into vinyl. The other thing that you're going to want to pick up, these are not expensive, this is a tracking force gauge or scale. And what you do is you use it to determine the weight of the stylus on the record. And if you're going to change out your cartridge, then you're going to need one of these if your tone arm doesn't have a scale on it, or if your counterweight doesn't have a scale on it. Even if your counterweight does have a scale on it, this is a good thing to get because it's more precise and it will give you an exact measurement, which is what you want. These aren't expensive. They're like $15 on Amazon, and definitely worth the cost of picking up. Another thing you can do to improve your audio quality is to upgrade your cables. Cables are a bit of a controversial thing. Some people say that upgrading helps, some people say it doesn't. There is some science behind it, and to a point it does help. Once you get beyond a certain point, after that it's really more of a placebo effect, or if there is an actual improvement in audio quality, it's only measurable by instruments, or even if you can hear it, it probably isn't worth the additional cost of going to that next level. You don't have to spend great gobs of money to upgrade your cables. You can get upgraded cables starting at about $35, $45 on up to into the tens of thousands of dollars. Once you get beyond sort of the $100, $125, $150, $160 range, you're really not getting any discernible improvement after that. This is a cable that comes with a lot of components, and as you can see, it's a very small gauge cable. It's just got the plastic sheathing around it, and it's just going to give you the sound that you get from, that you're used to from audio components. This is the cable that comes with the Kanto speakers, and as you can see, it's a heavier gauge wire right out of the box, but it still does not have really much in the way of shielding or insulation. It's still just the plastic jacket around the wire. This is what upgraded cables look like, and as you can see, they're much more substantial. There's heavier gauge wire in here, there's better shielding, better insulation. These come from a company called Unity Audio, and they were loaned to me for purposes of this demonstration. This particular line of cable is called Cancer Fighter, and the owner of the company that makes these is a cancer survivor, and proceeds from sale of this line of cables is going to cancer research. So if you buy these, you're going to do yourself some good, you're also going to do other people some good. The higher gauge wire that you get in a cable like this allows the electrons that make up our audio signal, the signal that travels from the turntable through the cable to the speakers, travel more freely, more easily. And the improved shielding and insulation is going to protect against interference from other electrical components that may be in the area. You don't have to just upgrade the speaker cables, you can go with power cable as well. And as you can see, this is a substantial cable. It's got much larger, much more substantial connectors on it. And these are going to give you a discernible improvement in audio quality. All of these things are going to help improve the audio quality you get without spending great gobs of money. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it as your budget allows. This turntable retails for about $600 in Canada, and you can get it on sale for a couple $100 less. This set of U4 speakers retails for about $300, and you can get them on sale for less. The subwoofer retails for about the same, and again, you can get it on sale for less. Cables like this are going to be in the $150, $160 range, and again, that's really all you need to spend to get vastly improved audio quality out of your music. So thank you for watching. Go out and buy some vinyl and enjoy your listening.